And we are so glad to have you here with us this evening, Jerusalem. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. It's great to be here, and it's good to see some familiar faces and some new faces. So welcome. Thanks for taking this time at the end of what it may have been a long day, may have been an easy day. So just glad that you're here. I'm going to start by sharing my screen so we can just jump in and use the best use of your time. So slideshow, here we go, play from start. Okay. So I hope that you're prepared. You're here for Episcopal Evangelism, seeking, naming, celebrating, and inviting. And that is what we are going to talk about tonight. We're going to start with a little story about me. And this really young, fresh-faced girl is me, not quite 20 or a little over 25 years ago. This is from my wedding, and my 25th wedding anniversary was this past Monday, so 25 years ago. And these right here, all these girls are some of my very best friends from college. And this girl right here in the gingham, Joanne with the shining face, this is a story about Joanne and a story about invitation. I went to college here in Arkansas, but I came from Alaska. My family's originally from Arkansas, but we were living in Southeast Alaska at the time, where my father was a Baptist minister. And I came back to the family school in Arkansas to attend college, but I didn't know a single person. I had met my roommate briefly right here. This is Janetta, my roommate. But that was it. Like, I just I had known her about a day and we were going to be roommates. And so it's getting time. My mom had come with me from Alaska to move me into the dorms. We had done the several trips to the store for all the things we'd forgotten. And it was getting time for her to leave, for her to go back to my grandparents and then fly back to Alaska. And we kept finding reasons for her not to leave, because we were both starting to get kind of anxious and emotional. And as badly as I wanted to be on my own, it's kind of scary, right? When you just are all of a sudden cut loose. And so I was sitting there and we were kind of hemming and hawing. And all of a sudden, my dorm room door just flew open. And there was this really bubbly girl in the door, tiny, tiny girl. And she said, "Hi, my name's Joanne, and we're going to a mixer later. Do you want to go?" And I just kind of looked at her like, who is this girl? Looked at my mom and thought, well, I better be polite because my mom's watching. And so I said, yes, sure, I'll go to a mixer. And you have to, for context, this was a Southern Baptist college. So a mixer just meant we were going to play youth group games. It was nothing particularly exciting. So I said, yes, I would go. So that was that very night. And I did go to that mixer. We played a youth group game called Chubby Bunny. If you've never played, ask your neighbor. We played Chubby Bunny. And all of these girls that you see here in this picture with me at my wedding were there that night. And they continue to be my best friends through college. And 25 years later, we are still really all close and really great friends. The picture on the right is me in December of 2019 at my father's funeral. And you can see that a few of the girls were able to make that. So from wedding to funeral here. And here's Joanne, there's Janetta, there's our friend Sherry. We're all in the original picture. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that if Joanne had not invited me that night to that mixer, if she had not introduced me to the rest of those gals, I had not had someone to eat dinner with every night for that freshman year of college, I might not have stayed in college. I might not have met my husband. I might not have got my degree. Like, I can trace so much of who I am now and how my life has evolved to just that one simple invitation. To go play Chubby Bunny at a student mixer. We've been through, those young girls 25 years ago, of course, they couldn't imagine what was ahead. Divorces, miscarriage, deaths of parents, illnesses, moves across country, right? Mental health issues, physical health issues. We're all in our mid to late 40s, and hopefully things have just begun. And we still have a lot more of life together and friendship together. But her invitation that night is something that I can pinpoint and say that really did impact me and change my life, and really was good news for me. So what I would like for us to do now, we're kind of immediately going to be thrown in here, and I'm going to ask Jason to do breakout groups for us of about 3 people per group. And all I want you to do in your group is to share your name and then think about an invitation that someone either made to you or that you made to someone that made an impact. Now, it doesn't have to be a life-changing impact, but it's just an invitation that you remember, an invitation to an event, an invitation to a relationship, an invitation to think of something in a new, fresh way, but something that was an invitation. So we're just going to take, we'll just spend about 5 minutes. So each person will get about, in your group, I guess we'll take 6 minutes. So each person can have about 2 minutes. And please be mindful of each other so that you each get a chance to share. But we're going to just break out. We have Jason send you off. Please say yes when you get sent to a room. And then we'll come back and maybe just a few people will share what that experience was like. So what's your name and what's an invitation that's made an impact on your life? Yeah. Here comes everybody. It's like the rapture in reverse. You can tell I was Baptist, right? Everybody's coming back. You can always tell the groups that have the long talkers because they're the last ones back. No judgment. Can't tell. And then there's those of you who are efficient and you're done. You're ready to go. All right, there we go. There comes everybody. All right. All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for doing that. All right, let's see. Are we all back? Yeah, Jim's back. Hi, Jim. It's good to see you. Jim is one of my former students in the Evangelism licensure program through Bexy Seabury. So it's always fun to see him.
Hi, Jerusalem. Good to see you as well.
Good to see you. Jim, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. You know, I always pick on you anytime I can see you. Can you give me some feedback on how that went? Were y'all able to share some stories?
It was a really fun experience. You know, first of all, we did exactly what we were told to do. We ran through that pretty fast. And so we were able to have other conversations and talk about other things. But, you know, invitations are so important. You know, in one person's case, it led them to living in San Diego, and one person's case led them to meeting their wife. So that was a really fun experience to know when to do that.
That's awesome. Thank you. Susan Jester, I'm going to pick on you now because you and I have an affinity for fun glasses. So, and I've also had pink hair before. So I just feel, you know, we're soul partners here. How was it in your group?
It was really interesting. Same experience that Jim just described. One person met a new kind of way of life, and another person got into the career that they ended up being in. And yeah, it was fun. And we also had a little time to talk afterwards. So
great. Well, good. I'm glad you've all had a chance to connect. So we just do that at the beginning is just to kind of root ourselves in this idea of invitation, which for a lot of Episcopalians can make us nervous, right? Like, and I get it. I get all the reasons why. So let me show you kind of what we're going to go over in our remaining time together. And we are going to also get to talk about invitation a little bit. So in our time tonight, we're going to kind of cover 4 ideas. And this is just a good brief overview that I'm just kind of hopefully wetting your whistle about, maybe planting some seeds, getting some people interested in evangelism. Jason's going to have information about more trainings coming up. I'm going to share some resources at the end. But so this is just kind of a nice overview. So we're going to talk about what is Episcopal evangelism exactly. We're going to talk a little bit about why does it even matter? How do we share? And then how can we practice and invite others to practice evangelism as well, which can be a really important step that we don't always talk about. Okay, so let's start with what Episcopal evangelism is. So Episcopal evangelism is rooted in Scripture. It's part of our baptismal identity. If you think you know where it is in the baptismal covenant, feel free to put that in the chat. Love to have interaction in the chat, so feel free to use that as we go through questions, ideas, thoughts you have. It's a spiritual practice. It's something that feeds us, and is not just for those who we might be encountering, but it's also for us. Episcopal evangelism is unique to each individual and each faith community. I love to tell the story about how wide and broad the Episcopal Church is. We're unified around a few things, our baptismal covenant and the prayer book and some other things, but really this church is very diverse, and it's very different. Within the span of about 2 weeks, I was on a beach in Florida having a fancy cocktail in a super fancy hotel, with a bishop and some priests and some lay leaders. And then the very next week, I was in dairy country, again with a bishop and some priests and some lay leaders being offered milk for dinner. I mean, like in a wine glass. So our country, not just is our country wide, but our church is wide. And so evangelism is very contextual. There's not one way to do it. One way does not fit all. One size does not fit all. And that to me is exciting. Episcopal evangelism is a way to embody the very life and practices of Jesus in the world, and to be filled with the Spirit and formed into even more in the likeness of Christ. So it's active and receptive. And it's a joyful sharing of what we individually and corporately know to be good news and deep truth, and a celebration of how we see God at work in our lives and in others' lives and in the world. So that is kind of what Episcopal evangelism is. The shorthand for all of this, the practice of evangelism, we say, is Episcopal evangelism is when we seek, name, and celebrate the loving presence of Jesus in the stories of all, and then invite everyone to more. So we seek, we name, and we celebrate, and then we invite. I like for us to think about seeking as kind of putting on a pair of goggles, like special goggles, My kids loved this movie called Spy Kids when they were little, and they had these special goggles they could wear to pretend to see things, right? But what if we put on a lens of looking for where God is showing up? And not just in big ways, sometimes in big ways, but sometimes in small ways. Sometimes the presence of God is just being in the grocery store and kind of seeing a lanky, hair in his face, little bit awkward, super tall teenager helping someone who maybe is shorter, not as strong, not as agile, be able to get that box off the top shelf, right? Sometimes the presence of God is simply that. It's being able to see where love is showing up, where grace is showing up, where patience is showing up. And then it's naming those things. It's naming them to ourselves and saying, oh, that looks like God to me. That looks like Jesus's presence to me. And then celebrating that, maybe by sharing that story on Facebook or Instagram or in a text message to somebody or over coffee. I saw the most remarkable thing the other day, right? And that was remarkable to me. I recently saw some guys helping this older couple move a van that had stalled in the middle of the street. And where I live in Arkansas, there are some different tensions among different people groups, as you can imagine. And yet the very ones that were serving this couple were, it was definitely two groups of people that maybe would not think that they would get along, but they were serving each other and they were cooperating and they were receiving and giving. And it was beautiful. And that to me was God and the presence of Jesus. And so being able to name those, tell those sorts of stories, and then inviting everyone to more. And what more is can be a little, sometimes a little tricky, but But really all more is more of those experiences, more stories, more ways to encounter God's love, more time to sit and share and listen and look for where God is showing up in our world. So these sound like pretty great things, I think. I think that all sounded pretty positive. You can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you disagree, but I think we're all probably on board with that. Sounds great. But we're still often pretty reluctant, right? Like that's a thing that we're still kind of like, oh, I don't know evangelism or Episcopalians. I don't know if we want to do that. That makes me nervous. So why are we so nervous? What are the things that we're nervous about? Well, I think they are a variety of things, right? We have these ideas like, should I leave it to the professionals and clergy? Or how will I learn to do it? We wonder, don't Episcopalians just evangelize with our actions and not our words? Some of us think, well, what if people reject me when I talk about faith? These are all legitimate. Isn't evangelism disrespectful to non-Christians? These are all legitimate concerns, and feel free to put some of your concerns like in the chat. What are some of the things that you have heard about, or you have thought, or you have heard other people say about why Episcopalians don't evangelize? Just feel free to stick those in the chat, and we'll talk about fear. Yes, absolutely, Andrew. There's a lot of fear around practicing evangelism. It can be very nerve-wracking, especially if we're not trained or we haven't practiced it, right? It's like, how many of you, you don't want to feel like some door knocking freak. Me either. I do not want to feel like that either. No, thank you. Not enough sense of authority. Absolutely. Like, who are we, right? Like, who are we to be telling other people, right? Or I might not know all the answers to their questions. Rejection. Yes, everyone fears rejection. That's a 100% normal emotion. Yep. Fear of being associated with Christian white nationalism or those Christians, right? Absolutely. Yeah, being a radical evangelical. Absolutely. Right? Like, again, like we don't want to be associated with those sorts of things. These are all really legitimate concerns. There's a couple that I'll just address real shortly, and we get into a lot more of this in some of our other trainings, but because we're doing an overview tonight, I won't spend a time on each of these questions. But one of the ones I want to talk about is evangelism disrespectful to non-Christians? And one of the things I want to say about that is, it depends, as everything does, right? But we hope that Episcopal evangelism is not, because there's that part in our baptismal covenant that says that we'll honor the dignity of all people, right? We'll seek and serve Christ in all people, and we'll honor the dignity of all people. We really believe that it is not honoring the dignity to decide for other people what they do or don't want to hear about. That it's not honoring the dignity of other people to hide part of ourselves, to not be authentic about who we are, because it says it's like it's condescending almost to say, well, I'm going to decide for you what you want, what you don't want, instead of saying, this is who I am, this is what I love, what do you love, right? And having a mutual relationship. Hopefully honoring the dignity of all people means that we're always seeking to have this mutual relationship where we are learning as much as we are giving. And so sometimes in the Episcopal Church, we do this beautiful job of lifting up people with other faiths, which is a wonderful thing to do. But again, we're not being in full relationship with them if we're also not sharing what we love and finding maybe the places where those things intersect, learning from each other's stories. So I just encourage us to think differently about that. We don't have to go right out and practice that, but maybe to start wondering about that. What would it look like to be authentic and brave about who we are with people who come from different backgrounds? What would that seem like? Yeah, and we've all talked about this one. What if people think I'm like those Christians? And that's just a long game, right? Like, we just have to continue to show up and be different. And connect our actions to our faith, So how do we overcome our reluctance to share? Well, there's lots of ways and in lots of different tacks, but the three things we're going to talk about tonight are that it's always helpful to remember the good news for ourselves, and then to connect our own stories to that, and then to practice. How many of you ever have had like either played an instrument or had a child in your house who played an instrument? Okay, yeah, And how was that child when you first started? Horrible. You sounded horrible. They sounded horrible. You wanted to put them in the basement or outside in the carport, anywhere but in here. That's okay. That's called a beginner. So some of us are beginner evangelists and we're really bad at it, and that's okay. But do you notice how the beginner band, saxophonist, I had a saxophonist in my house. The beginner saxophonist does not get on stage. He does not play Carnegie Hall after just like 2 practices, right? He's going to have years and years. And so he starts in like a safe place. He practices at home because they won't kick him out. And he practices with other people who are really bad, right? Which is their students with maybe a teacher. And then eventually they get to play together in a concert at Christmas, and all the parents are very proud, and it's awful, but we were very proud. And then they continue to get a little better and a little better. And then maybe by the time they're juniors in high school, they get a solo, still in the greater band, right? And then if they're really passionate about it and they continue to pursue it, maybe then eventually they make it to Carnegie Hall or whatever your local symphony is or whatever, right? Band. The same is true of any spiritual practice, but especially evangelism. It's really wonderful that y'all have all showed up here together, that you're going to have some other opportunities to do evangelism together, because you are your best practice mates. So some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, don't think about practicing them on a stranger, please, not yet. Think about practicing them with each other, with the people in your home, maybe not even the people in your home, maybe people in your congregation, maybe your best friend, and tell them you're a beginner. When you practice these things, say, I'm a beginner evangelist and I would now like to practice. If you love me, please don't kick me out, right? Like when we begin with that sort of attitude, that just invites so much joy and goodwill from the people we're practicing with. And I think that can help us get over some of these fears that we have to be the experts and we have to be perfect and we have to go find a stranger and convert them. Yeah, your kids would kick you out. Yeah, that's true. So maybe don't start with your kids. Okay. The other thing I think we need to think about is, what is it that we are sharing? I grew up Southern Baptist, and it was very clear that evangelism for the tradition I came from is what we were sharing was keeping people from going to hell. That was the whole point, right? And so it was a very clear mission statement. We knew what it was. It put a lot of sense of urgency into things because you need to save as many people from hell as you could in your entire life, right? Even as like a 10-year-old, I had that But for us, for Episcopalians, sometimes it can be a little harder to identify that. What is it that we're sharing, right? It is so wide and diverse, and we have such different interpretations of things. And so what is it? What is this good news that we are actually sharing? So we have kind of come up with this idea of thinking about the bounty of what it means to follow Jesus as an Episcopalian through the lens of the baptismal covenant. And if you think about it like a farmer's market basket or a CSA basket, right? Like a farm subscription, and you get this basket and it's just filled with amazing bounty. What is it? So these are the things. We've taken the baptismal covenant, we've kind of turned the language around a little bit. And this is what all comes in our basket. Okay, we all get new life. We all get the opportunity to turn from selfishness and fear to love and hope through Jesus. We all get meaning. People really are seeking meaning right now. And we all get meaning through a relationship with Jesus and through following God this way. We get belovedness. We get to learn that we are loved and wanted just as we are, simply because we are, and not because of anything we do or don't do, right? We get community and fellowship, often around a table. We get the wisdom of Scripture, and we get the ability to question some of that wisdom, right? We get to bring our questions. We get a connection to the divine. We get God's bottomless forgiveness. It just keeps flowing. We get good news of great love that we can share with everybody. We get love for our neighbors. We get the ability to see the divine in others. We get the gift of dignity of self, and then the ability and encouragement to honor the dignity of all others. We get a passion for justice and peace. And best of all, because this is a kind of a big deal list, we get God's help in all of this, right? Now, what I think is particularly beautiful about this is that it's very contextual, right? And it's very individual, and it's for all of us. And so how we discover these things, how we live these things out, how we even share what this is like, is going to be a little bit different based on where we are. Just like our farmers market baskets would be a little bit different based on what part of the country we are in and what part of the world. Now, y'all are in the land of plenty, right? When it comes to this kind of stuff, like Southern California, like, you've got all the stuff probably all year. Here in Arkansas, we don't. We have like tomato famine, right? Like every winter, there's no good tomatoes. They're just all disgusting, and things like that, right? So we have to think about, okay, what is justice and peace? What's a passion for justice and peace? How does that need to be expressed in the Diocese of San Diego uniquely, right? What's the gift of that look like? It might look different. Yeah, but we do have water plenty. You're right, Barbara. So we have different gifts, right? And we have different contexts. And so we're able to share this bounty in different ways. But this is what we're sharing. When we ask people to share the good news of God in Christ through word and deed, which is what it says in our baptismal covenant, this is what we're asking you to share. So as you think about these things, think about where this is, what part of this is particularly good news for you in your life, what right now, right? Maybe you've been experiencing bottomless forgiveness lately. Maybe you really have been engaged with scripture and just seen some amazing new things. Maybe your passion for justice and peace is just really on fire, especially given all the things that have been happening in our country the past week, especially. And so these are things that not every Christian denomination offers. These are unique to the ways that we as Episcopalians follow Jesus. And I think that's pretty special and pretty amazing that we get to share this bounty. So where do we see this bounty in our own lives? I think I just asked that question. And then can we share those stories? And that's where we move into a little bit of getting a little bit braver, right? So the seeking is, can I identify that story? Where is the bounty in my life? And then the naming is when we move into the, can I share that story? The bowls that you see in this picture, they come from a line by Martha Stewart herself. And my dog is named Martha Stewart, just to give you some context where this story is going. I have loved Martha Stewart since I was 10 years old and been obsessed. And I have also loved church work since I was about 10 years old. I grew up in a preaching family and just loved ministry. I was organizing church-wide events at 14. It's an illness or a gift. You can decide for yourself. But I've always had this love for both entertaining, hospitality, celebrating, and theology and church and worship and expression. And I've always had a hard time kind of marrying those two until the past few years. So this is a picture from my house from several years, just a few years ago. Actually, this was right before the last General Convention. So I guess that was 4 years ago. Can't believe it. And the guy in the pink shirt is our new priest. It was our new priest at the time. And the guy in this blue shirt over here is his husband, Mark. And that blue shirt's my husband. And we were having, we have a church, small group from our church. And we were having a big shrimp boil to welcome Greg and Mark as the new priest and having them out. And of course I had it all set up and flowers from our garden on our farm and et cetera, et cetera. And at the time I was still working at the church where Greg is the priest. I hadn't come on staff yet for the presiding bishop. And so we had this great party. It was a beautiful night. It was so much fun. We ate so much food. It was gorgeous. And he came in the next day to work and gave me these bowls. And he said, so he's a second career priest. And he said, years ago when I worked in advertising, I sat next to Martha Stewart at a dinner. I said, Martha Stewart herself. And he said, yes. He said, and we got to talking about coffee farms and coffee. And he said, the next day she sent me these latte bowls from her line. And he said, I've had them all these years. They don't really go with our style. And after seeing what you did yesterday, Mark and I want to give you these bowls. And I was like, Martha Stewart herself. And so he gave me these bowls. And what that did in that moment, the way that Greg and Mark were Jesus to me in that moment, is they helped me feel beloved in how I had been created to be. They helped me understand that my gifts were ones that did go together, that my way of loving others and serving others in this way and forming these gatherings where we could come around a table and share stories and celebrate was part of my ministry. And they affirmed them with these bowls. And so now whenever I see these bowls, I think about that. And so that is a way that I see that bounty of belovedness and connection to God and the dignity. They honored the dignity of who I was created to be, right? Like they saw all those things. And in my life, even when I couldn't see them, and then they shared them with me. So I share that story just as an example of how simple, how fun one of our faith stories can be. They don't have to be these conversion stories of I was on a mountain and I was blind and now I'm not blind and now I'm going to go on the street corner and tell everybody, right? It can just be these really beautiful interactions that we have. So if I know your story and I see what makes you, and what makes you hope and what brings you to life, then I can see God in that story. And hopefully you can see God in my story. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important for us to use our words and our actions. You know, we're really great at our actions. I mean, I would say that Episcopalians probably have more food pantries than any other denomination. I've never put that to the test, but I'm betting. But how many of us can articulate why that food pantry has anything to do with our faith and is not just a good thing in the world? In other words, what makes us as Jesus followers on the Episcopal branch, right, of Christianity, what makes us different than the Rotary Club? You know, that's a question I think we have to wrestle with. And why do we follow Jesus as Episcopalians this way? And we have to begin to practice naming those things and saying those things because people are hungry. They are longing for those things in that basket. They are longing for meaning. They are longing for connection to the divine. They are longing to know they're beloved. They're longing to fight for peace and justice and to have hope. And we have all those things and we can share them. But story is where these things emerge, being able to tell the stories and make the connections. But we have to practice because some of us, you know, we're babies. So that's what we're going to do next. So I want you just to sit for a minute and think about this question. And then we're going to break into small groups. If you have paper, pen, notes on your phone where you can take a few notes, I should have warned you ahead of time. Feel free to get up, get what you need. We have time, but you are going to need the ability to make 3 notes about something, okay? The first thing, while you're doing that, I'll give everybody a second, but I'm going to leave this question up too so you can see it. Take a moment and think about a turning point in your life, a watershed moment, something you struggled with, a point of pain or hardship or loss, or maybe great rejoicing, something that was exciting that happened. For you type A people, this does not have to be the most important watershed moment in your life, okay? So don't stress out trying to pick like the most important, just a moment. This could be having a child, getting a divorce, taking a risk on starting your own business, the loss of a parent, right? This could be so many different things. But take a minute and make a note of what that is, either on your paper or your phone or whatever. Just kind of write that down. What was that moment? And so that's number 1 on this my beautiful drawing that I've made here. Write down a few words or phrases that describe that event or that season of your life. Okay. Just let everybody have a minute. We're not rushing.
Question, this is Amani, a girl. So are we still working on the first, because you said to make 3, so are we still working on the 1,
We're
right?
still working on 1. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. When you get done with that, you can write number 2. Name. Write down the name of the person or persons who walked through that season with you. Maybe they were the person who cried with you. Maybe they were the person who helped pack boxes or brought you food or let you just complain anytime you needed to. Maybe they're the ones who celebrated. You know, we're so proud of you, bragged on you, baked you a cake, you know, took you out for a special treat, spammed your Facebook page with excitement, whatever it is. It might be one person, it might be many people. And again, it didn't have to be the one that was the most, but just someone who showed up in some way for you during that season. Now, if you have room on that same page, you can use that same page. But if you don't, you can turn your page over. But what you want to do now is you want to think about those people or that person, and then write down all the ways that those people displayed attributes of God in that situation. So maybe they were long suffering because they did listen to you complain. You know, they were the person you called and vented to. Maybe they were patient. Maybe they wept with you, like God weeps with us. Maybe they danced over you the way God dances over us. Maybe they laughed with us the way God laughs with us. Maybe they were full of wisdom, self-control, protection. Unconditional love, forgiveness. Okay, so as you wrap up, just about 1 minute, we're going to break back into our groups. And this time what you're going to do is you are going to share the story of what you wrote down as much as you feel comfortable. And don't forget, we're not recording it in there, and we will use the cone of silence. We'll just, what we say in our little room stays in our little rooms. What you say in evangelism training stays in evangelism training. So we'll honor that. But how I would like you to frame the story is, this happened in my life. fairly succinctly as much as possible. I know there's going to be a lot of details to some of our stories, but as much as possible, if we can keep it, a little bit brief. This person or people, the people or persons who showed up were their names or the relation, my aunt, my spouse, etc. And they showed me the love of God through, and then named those attributes. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a little bit longer because I know it might take you a little bit longer to share your stories. So we're going to go in and we're going to take 7 minutes. So that should give everybody about 3 minutes with a little time for a little extra to share their stories. And I would encourage you, as the people finish sharing, to say, thank you for sharing your story with me, just to make sure we acknowledge the bravery that sometimes it takes. So, and we'll stick this in the chat as well, so that you are clear on what you're doing. So Jason, if you want to go ahead and send people back to their groups, I will put this in the chat. Here comes everybody. Well, congratulations, you did it. Woohoo, way to go. You all just evangelized to each other. Yay! And the crowd goes wild. Yes, give yourselves a hand. It's amazing. We're going to stop sharing for a minute. Let's see. I'm going to play my favorite game. Let me pick on somebody. Barbara, you seem enthusiastic to this evening. Will you share with us how it went in your group?
I'm going to guess that Jason's up there laughing his head off at that thought, because he knows what I said to him yesterday. I said that evangelism was a dirty word.
Yeah.
Well, we're Episcopalian. We don't do evangelism.
I know.
We just we don't
It
go
is
say,
a dirty word.
thank you. We don't tell people, oh, Jesus is in my life and did this. We don't do that. But our group we had a very cool group. I love my little group. It was kind of fun having the same people again. I was pleasantly surprised. So so we all had very different experiences from each other, different beginnings and different kinds of outcomes, but it was really interesting. So thank you for that chance.
You're welcome. Great, thank you. All right, let's see here. Samantha, how was your group? Were you in the same group? Did I accidentally pick someone? Oh, no, good. Okay, how was your group?
My group is funny because I actually know two of the people in there because we've been in other meetings. And one goes to the same church I went to. But yeah, we all had different stories and different reasons, and it's making those connections so that you might tell your story and you not even realize that makes a connection with somebody else, or it makes it easier to understand, or you get to know that person. So we had a good discussion, but we all had different reasons and different stories to tell, which is important.
That's awesome. I love that. Ross, can I pick on you? Hi, Ross. Nice to meet you. I'm going to pick on you. Another person
Hey.
of Ross's.
Yeah,
Hey.
good to see you all.
Yeah. How was it here?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Yeah, it's great to connect and hear people's stories. I feel like, I don't know, we all believe in a thing unseen. So it's cool to hear how people are comforted by community, by God, and what brings people onto a Zoom call like this.
That's awesome. Thank you. So you all evangelized, you all told a God story, and now you all know an easy little fill in the blank way to do that, right? So now as you walk through your day, it doesn't just have to be for those big pivotal moments. It can be, and maybe you want to write a few of these out so you have some stories written out in a journal or on the back of a bill, an envelope, whatever, right? On a Facebook post, whatever you want to do. But also this is a way to literally move through your day. Always seeking, what's happening? Did my mind just get changed? Did I just watch a really cool interaction between people? Was I having a bad moment and then this cool thing happened and now I realize I'm in a much better mood, right? Or I was feeling particularly lonely and then this thing happened and I don't feel as lonely anymore. Why was that? Oh, it's because so-and-so sent me a text and that made me laugh, and laughter is of God, and right, so it becomes a way to begin to identify where God is showing up, how God is showing up, and then to be able to succinctly articulate that, which I think is a huge part of evangelism. To be able to do that, because so many times we say, well, I don't know what my God story is. I don't have a God story. You actually have God stories every day. All of us do, but it's just a matter of kind of seeing them and naming them. So as you think about the bounty that we have to share, as you think about how you have been created and where the bounty shows up in your life, and as you think about where the God stories, as you begin to practice seeing, seeking, naming, and celebrating where God is showing up in your life, and not just your life, but the life of others. See, that little thing that we just did, you can also help other people with. You can see it in their life, but then you can ask them those questions, so how was your day? Well, who showed up that helped you with that thing? To me, that seems like this part of God. Does that seem like some part of God to you? Etc. Right? So it becomes a way to draw people out. And maybe they say, no, that sounds crazy. That didn't seem like God to me at all. Or maybe they say, hey, I never thought about it that way. Right? And then you continue on. So where can you practice? How can you practice sharing the bounty, identifying the bounty in your own life, and articulating your God stories? You can do this at home if that's a safe environment to do this. Maybe you can do one of those things, not all of those things. Maybe you can do some of these things online, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on chats, sharing these stories, just practicing, sharing some of the bounties, saying things like, in a week like this, there's a lot of unanswered questions, but I'm really grateful that I am part of a community that follows Jesus by seeking justice, right? Like that is a beautiful witness to make online. At church and in our broader community, these are all places that we can share the bounty and we can practice. Often, with Episcopalians especially, we just need to practice with each other more than anything before we get ready to go out to the larger community. So if you're in DOK, if you're on the altar guild, if you're in the choir, if you're on the vestry, those are ready-made groups that you can practice with. That you can say, hey, I'm a baby evangelist, or I'm a newbie evangelist, I'm a beginner evangelist, and I want to practice some of this stuff, and I think we should all practice together. Would you be willing to do that? Now, if that's a little too awkward, if you're like, I can't carry that burden alone, never fear, we have some resources that can help you. Jason is going to send you some booklets and some things after this training, but we also have a 6-part program called Embracing Evangelism. And I'm going to show the commercial for it, the little trailer we have, and then I'm going to take questions, just so you know. We're getting close to the end of our time, and I want to honor your evening. So Embracing Evangelism is 6 sessions. You can host it in person or on Zoom. We highly recommend it for vestries and other existing small groups within a church, like an altar guild or DOK or Brotherhood of St. Andrew. But also, if you're looking to start a small group ministry, it's a great one to begin with. It features real stories, not made up stories, real stories of real people. It gives people opportunities to practice in ways like we've practiced tonight. And it really does this beautiful thing about between all the people who participate. It really builds really deep, authentic, life-giving community in just some pretty amazing ways. So we are going to watch the little commercial for it now. And this is something on our website. You are welcome to share this and there's a way to download it, to share it, any of these resources. Just let me say, any resource that you find on our website, you are free to use and to share. You don't have to ask our permission first. Just take it and share it and use it. So, okay, I am going to share this. I'm going to optimize for all the things. And here we go.
Stories of transformation, moments of shared joy, prayers of deep gratitude, acts of service. These are just some of the ways through which we seek and speak of Jesus' loving presence and invite other people to celebrate God's life and love for them. Join us for Embracing Evangelism, a 6-part course exploring the gifts of Episcopal evangelism. During these sessions, you will be invited to explore evangelism as a spiritual practice rooted in holy curiosity, a practice through which we learn to seek, name, and celebrate Jesus' loving presence in our stories and the stories of others, and then invite everyone to more. Each session in the series features a masterclass-style video led by lay and clergy leaders from across the Episcopal Church, and is followed by time for group discussion and prayer. Come as you are, excited, skeptical, or inquisitive, and let's see what emerges as we embrace evangelism as Episcopalians together. This offering is made possible through a partnership between the Episcopal Church and Virginia Theological Seminary.
So that's just a little brief overview of Embracing Evangelism. There's a second video that's available. There's a webinar here that talks about how to lead it on Zoom. There are samples of how to use this as a retreat with sample retreat schedules. If it's a day-long retreat, 2-day, 3-day, etc. You can also do it weekly. It's 6 sessions, so you can do it however you want. You can rotate facilitators. There are facilitator guides and participant guides. It'll ask you for your email just one time so that you can see, and that's just so that we can communicate with you about new resources and trainings that we offer. But you can download each of the videos, or you can just stream them from your computer. They go over a little bit of what we've talked about, but they go more in depth, and there's a lot more exercises and a lot more to see. It's led and participated in by both lay and clergy, so it's not skewed one way or the other. It's completely free, and we hope that people will use it. So I am hopefully coming to see you guys in September and do an in-person training that Jason's putting together. And maybe with some of my other colleagues. But until then, this would be a great thing to maybe get a group of people to do. You can even do it with one other person over Zoom. You know, you don't even have to do it with a whole large group. If there's somebody on this call that you really connected with, say, hey, let's check that out and let's do that together. You can do it with just one other person. We recommend that you do it with at least one other person because there are exercises in there. But if you just want to watch it on your own, you can do that too. So that wraps it up for the official stuff. Now we'll just take a few minutes for questions. If anybody has questions about our resources, about this practice, anything you would like to know, we'll take about just 3 or 4 minutes. Oh, and our website is theepiscopalchurch.com or .org. It's theepiscopalchurch.org. My apologies for that language. And you can, when you go to theepiscopalchurch.org, you'll see at the top, it says ministries, I believe. And then if you click on that, evangelism is one of the first ones that drops down. And you hit that, and it takes you to all of our resources. We have multiple video resources. There's a podcast. There are Zoom support calls that are recorded that we put up. There are lots of things you can print, exercises you can do, things to read, and we're always creating new content. So any questions or comments? Jason, do you have anything?
I would just like to say one little thing here.
Yeah.
Besides that, this is really cool and interesting and much better and different than I expected it to be. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And it must be late. It must be late where you are because it's only 7:30 here.
Mhm.
And this is the truth. This is not a joke. Where I live, on one side of me, I have an avowed atheist. On the other side of me, I have a Jehovah's Witness. I have a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses here where I live, and I've had them both in the car at the same time. And I know there's got to be a joke in there someplace, but also, I don't know. I think about evangelizing, and I think about these two people, and it's like, I don't know. I wouldn't have a clue how to approach that other than just, I mean, they both know me pretty well by now because we've lived together for 10 years almost. But it's a weird situation.
Yeah, that is a weird situation. And, that's the sort of thing where we can pray for discernment. Like, is this the kind of conversation I'm supposed to have with them? But maybe the conversations are, I would love to hear how you became a Jehovah's Witness, how you became a devout atheist, and would you mind if I also shared, because I'm practicing, and I'm not trying to convert you, I'm just trying to practice my story. Right? I'd love to hear yours. I'd love to share mine because we are good friends. And I trust you guys that you'll believe that I'm not trying to convert you, but that you'll listen and give me feedback as my friends, not as possible converts, right? Like it might be that kind of conversation, or it might not. It might not be the right group to have that conversation with. So, but I think praying about that, prayer is a huge part of evangelism, right? So thank you for that, for bringing that up.
Can I chime in there for a second,
Yeah.
Jerusalem?
Yes,
I
please.
think part of the challenge in situations like that oftentimes is because when we have heard evangelism talked about by other folks, it feels like it's coercion, and it feels like it's trying to get somebody to do something rather than the announcement of good news, which is what evangelism is supposed to be. Announcement of where we see God at work in the world. For example, maybe it could be something, Barbara, like, wow, how cool is this, that there's a devout atheist and a Jehovah's Witness and an Episcopalian in a car, beyond being a joke. Like, what kind of humor does God have in that? I wonder if this is just God getting a good giggle out of the conversations that we have here. That would be good news, to know that God is not vengeful and angry, but maybe has a sense of humor and is joyful and happy. So, I think that that's oftentimes what gets it trips us up, is just like you were talking about the earlier, Jerusalem, is some of the things that we've experienced, and of other traditions and how they understand evangelism, rather than how we experience and practice evangelism as Episcopalians.
So good. All right. Well, thank y'all, and thank you for spending this time with me. I'm going to put my email in the chat. I like to remind people that, what are my thoughts about unbinding the gospel in order to get the congregation to participate?
Are you familiar with that book by Martha Grace Reese?
I am not. Yep.
So there's a question in the chat for those of you that may not have noticed about the book Unbinding the Gospel. Martha Grace Reese is the author of that book. It's a fantastic book. If your congregation is interested in it, we have a few people that have used it in their congregations. I'm happy to talk to you about it. There's probably 4 or 5 congregations, at least at this point, that have been going through it as a book study. And it's based upon a study that was done by the author called the Mainline Evangelism Survey, or something to that effect, where this person studied evangelism across a variety of different mainline denominations, and looked at where there was possibility, where there was room for growth, where there were things to celebrate, and what we could learn from that. So, folks, can we all just show Jerusalem some of our gratitude? Let's give her some snaps, some claps. But thank you so much to Jerusalem for joining us. What a gift of the presiding bishop's office to have Jerusalem as part of the team, and to offer her to us this evening to learn together and to think about evangelism. Friends, you all know the Good News Festival is on the horizon, and so I hope you're thinking about that. Jerusalem will be with us. So not only will she hopefully be with us in the fall to do a deeper dive into evangelism training, but be back at the Good News Festival and all of the awesome stuff that's going to be going on there. We're going to be sending out an email after this that will have materials, as Jerusalem mentioned earlier. There's a couple other things to know about. If you're interested in becoming a licensed lay evangelist, that is actually something that our canons actually call for, is the licensing of evangelists. There will be a link to find out more information about that, because your participation in this can apply to your nomination as a licensed evangelist in this diocese. And there's a few other things I want to just quickly let you know about before I let you go. The first is that we actually have a roundtable of evangelists that get together on the first Thursday of every month, just to check in, to hear about what's going on with evangelism at different congregations. And if that was something that you would be interested in participating in, I'll provide you information on that. I hope that at least a half dozen congregations have an interest in doing the 6-week course of Embracing Evangelism that we've looked at here and just kind of getting a taste of. And so if you would be willing to, please post on your social media about this. Use EDSD Evangelism, hashtag EDSD Evangelism, and let people know that you were here tonight, what you thought about it, what you were excited about it regarding this. Help us spread the word about this. And if you would like to do the workshop and you have trouble finding it online, it's pretty easy. There'll be links in the email that I'll send out as a follow-up, but I'm happy to assist you with finding that material. And I'd like to know what your next steps are for evangelism in your congregation. If there's anything I can do to be helpful, please let me know. So is there anything else that we should touch base on Jerusalem before we conclude?
I don't think so. I put my email in the chat. In all earnestness, y'all, when you give to your local parish, they give to the diocese, and then the diocese gives to the churchwide office, and that pays for my salary. So I work for you. And so if you need anything about the areas that I cover, which are evangelism, way of love, and good news gardens, or if you just need information about anything that you think maybe the Episcopal Church is doing, if I don't do it, I'll find the person who does. So feel free to reach out to me. If your church does do Embracing Evangelism, especially if you end up doing it on Zoom, I'm happy to jump on your first or your last call just to be your cheerleader. Always happy to show up and do that. So just let me know. And thank you guys so much. I hope you will feel the bounty of Jesus's love in your life this week. And I can't wait to see hopefully some of you in September and then December.